Here. Okay, today is Daf Kuf Yud Tes, and we're going to start from Daf Kuf Yud Ches and Beis towards the middle. But basically, we're discussing the idea of yad. A yad. First, we'll discuss yad. Remember what a yad for a food is: a handle for food, which means that if a tuma will touch the handle of this stalk, let's say, the tuma will not only will travel up to the food of the stalk, to the wheat of the stalk. So that's what we learned from the pasuk, that there's something called a yad to a food. A handle to a food is part of the food. Says the Gemara. Okay, we're starting from by the pink. Where it's like Amar Rav Chia Amar Rav. Okay, it's like the middle of the page. So here we go. Amar Rav Chia of Marav. Rav Chia Amar Rav says, Yesh yad l'tuma. I agree with you that there is a concept of yad when it comes to tuma. The ein yad lehechsher, but I don't agree that there's something of a yad when it comes to hechsher. We know that every food needs water to come upon it in order to make it susceptible to tuma. So, if water came on just the yad, it would not make it susceptible to tuma. That's what Rav said. Rabbi Yochanan says, Yesh yad l'tuma lehechsher. It works for both. Not only for tuma, but even to make it susceptible to tuma. Says the Gemara, but my kami palgi. What are they arguing about? Iba is same as svara, iba is same as kra. If you want, I could say it's logical, and if you want, I could say it's a pasuk. Iba is same as kra. If you want, I could say it's a pasuk. The pasuk only says that the Torah tells you water falls on a food item, right? And then the Torah says then a tumah falls on the food item, the food item becomes tameh. So Marsov a mikra nidrish lefanav v'loy lefnei fanav. Rav says that the drasha of yadais was only said when it comes to actual tameh, but not when it comes to hechsher, because that's too far above in the pasuk. Marsava, and one learns mikra nidrish lefanav lefnei fanav. The pasuk that speaks of two items and then adds the concept of yadais. Yadais will go on both items, both tuma and the actual idea of hechsher tuma. Iba yisema svara. If you want, I can say they're arguing in logic. Marsava Rabbi Yochanan holds hechsher tchilas tumahu. When you're making a item of food susceptible to tuma, that's the start of how it becomes tameh. So if you say that there's yad letuma, there's also yad lehechsher tuma. Marsava Rav holds hechsher lav tchilas tuma. Hechsher is not the beginning of tuma, and therefore yadais, the chiddush of yadais, was only said on a tuma itself, but not hechsher. So Kanya Kabbasid Rabbi Yochanan, we have a proof according to Rabbi Yochanan Brisa, Shem Yad letuma, Kach Yesh Yad lehechsher. The Brisa is pretty straightforward, that there's a concept of yad l'tuma, and there's also a concept of yad lehechsher. A piece of wheat doesn't accept tuma only if you cut it. If it's still connected to the ground, it doesn't mekabel tuma, of course, because of course then every piece of wheat had a worm come on it. But also it doesn't mekabel hechsher tuma. It doesn't become susceptible to tuma unless you cut it off the ground. The bottom line is this concept of yadais. We know there's a concept of yadais. The handle of something, of a food, is like the food itself. The question was, Rav says that was only if the food was susceptible to tuma. Then I say that if a tuma touches it, yes, it extends to the food itself, but not for hechsher tuma. And Rabbi Yochanan says even to make this hechsher tuma, if water falls on the stem over here, then the whole wheat is susceptible to tuma. So that was the discussion of about yadais. Remember, we learned also there's something called a shomer. What's a shomer? We learned yesterday that let's say right over here you have a shomer. You have a piece of hide that's protecting a large piece of meat on the inside, right over here. That's called a shomer. You see, by the way, the drumstick would be like a handle. But here it's a protection. So a shomer does more than that. It's moitzi or machnes. It can not only bring in tuma. If a tuma touches the hide, the meat becomes tame. And if the meat is an avela, it can be metama if you touch the hide. And also, if you need it to be the size of an egg, right, in order for it to be metama something else, you could add the hide to it. A shomer is even more than a yad. It has an extra din that you could combine to make a shear of an egg to be metama other foods. That's what we learned yesterday. So, says the Gemara, Omar Rav. Rav says, Ein yad lepochas mikazayis ve'ein shomer lepochas mikazayis. What Rav says is like this. Let's say you have right over here a little hot dog, right? That's smaller than the zayis, and it has a toothpick. It's a yad. This hot dog is less than a kazayis, and it's touching an egg, and the tumah touched the toothpick. But the toothpick is connected to a hot dog, which is less than a zayis. So is this considered a yad or not? So Rav said no. And therefore, if the tumah would touch the toothpick, let me just make that tumah. If a tumah would touch the toothpick, then the egg would not become tameh. Now, the same thing is a shomer. As you can see, the bone with the tiny marrow inside, the bone is a shomer. But if the marrow inside is less than the size of a bean, it's a tiny drop of marrow. This looks like too much marrow, but it's a tiny drop of marrow inside, and you have a lot of bone. So then it's not a shomer anymore. And therefore, if it's tameh, it's not considered a shomer. It's shomer on nothing because it's shomer on less than a bean of marrow. So if it touches the egg, it will not become tameh. That's the opinion of Rav. And Rabbi Yochanan holds the opposite. Rabbi Yochanan holds, yes, there is a yadais, even if it's less than a kazayas, and there is a shomer, even if it's less than a pole. Let's see it inside. Omar Rav. Rav said, Ein yad lepachas mikazayis. You don't have a yad for something that's less than a kazayis. As we saw the stick on the little hot dog, if that little hot dog is less than a zayis, that toothpick is not considered a yad. The Ein shomer lepachas mikapul. And if you have a bone marrow, let's say, and it's less than the size of a kapul, then that bone is not considered a protecting because it's protecting nothing. It's protecting a little ounce, half an ounce of marrow. Rabbi Yochanan holds there is a yad less than a kazayas, and there is a shomer pachas mikapul. Now, by the way, Rav will hold that there is a shomer if it's less than a kazayas. In other words, if there's half a zayas of, which is much more than a bean, you have like two ounces of marrow in a bone. So then, if it's a protecting, then you will consider it a shomer. But it's only if it's less than a pool. And Rabbi Yochanan says, I don't care what's in the bone, even if a tiny drop of marrow is in the bone is considered a shomer. Meisvei, let me ask you a question. Beis atzamas v'aleim beis chatzoy zeizim v'hichnis r'sheim beis labayis v'abayis mal aleim abayis tamei. Yehuda ben Miknoisa Omer Mishum Rabbi Yaakov heich shnei atzamas mitzarfen lekazayis. So what's this talking about? This is talking about you have a bone, right? You have a bone, and it has a human bone, right? And it has flesh, human flesh on it at the edge of it, but the edge of it is not in the house. Each one is a half a zayis, right? Only the bone is in the house, but the edge of it is not in the house. So the question is, will this now be as if it's in the house and the house is Thomas Mace because of an oil or not? So Tanakama says, no. Tanakama says the house is Tameh. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Nekoisa says, no, the house does not become Tameh, because each bone is only has a half a zayis on each, and you don't combine them to make it a zayis. Remember, a whole zayis of a dead person is metama ba'oil. But if you have a half a zayis on each bone, according to the Tanakama, they combine. And according to Yehuda, they don't combine. So the question is, according to the Tanakama cannot agree with Rav, because Rav holds that there's no yodais. This is not considered a yad if it's less than a half a zayis. So that's what the Gemara says. And then the Gemara is going to say, perhaps, maybe the Bryce is talking about that the bone is actually a shomer to a little bit of marrow in the bone. In other words, it's a regular bone, human bone, but it has a half a zayis of marrow in the bone. So perhaps that's what the Bryce is talking about. Well, in that case, then Rav would not, why wouldn't, according to Rav, of course, since it's larger than a pool, it is considered a shomer, but why would Yehuda say it's not, the house is tahar? So these are the two things that the Gemara is going to go on. So again, the two bones of a human body, and there's chatzi zeis on every bone, and they put the bone in the house, but the meat, the human flesh, is outside the house. So the according to the Tanakama, the bias is tamei. Yehuda says the bias is tahar because you can't combine the two bones to make it a kazayas. So the Gemara goes kufyu tesam alav Rav hai b'may moikim. How would he explain this brisa? Ibe yad kashiresha. If it's talking about a yad, then why would he agree to the Tanakama that it's tamei? How could he agree to the Tanakama that it's tamei? There's no yad when it's less than a kazayas. Ibe shomer, if he says no, the brisa is talking about of a human bone, but inside there's a half a zayas of marrow, kash is safe. And then why would he agree with Yehuda, the end of the second Tana who holds its tahar? Rav holds that if a shomer is more than a pool, if it's watching more than a bean size of marrow, then it should be it's good shomer. So Iba is saying shomer, Iba is saying yad. You could say that Rav agrees to say the brisa either way, because Iba is saying yad Yehuda ben Kamikaisa. If you want to say that the brisa is talking about the flesh, the human flesh is at the edge of the bone, the Rav will hold like a Yehuda ben Kamikaisa, then the home is tahar, because it's not a yad, because it's the less than a zayis. Iba is saying b'shoyma, and if you want to say it's talking about a shoyma and it's a closed bone, he holds like the Tanakama that the house is tamei. Rabbi Yochanan says kula b'yad. Rabbi Yochanan says that the whole thing is like a yad, and there the flesh of the human flesh is on the outside of the bone, right? Like you can see over here. And Rabbi Yochanan aligns himself with the opinion of the Tanakama that because the bone is like a yad, you can combine the two half as zaisim, and the house is tamei, and that's why Rabbi Yochanan will hold the house agrees with the Tanakama that the house is tamei. Udama Tanakama. Hashma, another question against Rav. Rabbi Yehuda says kulis, a thigh bone, a regular thigh bone, let's say in an animal thigh bone. Sheesh oleha kazayis basa, that has a kazayis basa on it. Gereres kula latoma. In other words, same idea. The question is like this: here's a thigh bone that has a kazayis basar on it. Okay, that's what the Bryce says. It has a kazayis basar on it. You touch the yad, the egg becomes tamei. That's what the Bryce says, right?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
So we a couple of minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, we learned that the yad doesn't combine, right? It's only the shomer combines. Is that correct?
When the shomer combines, but they both the shomer combines, the yad does not combine.
Right.
We're talking about transmitting tumah.
Okay.
Transmitting tumah is different than combination. In other
But we
words,
learned, but these two bones, the whole idea is that it's a half a zayit each. The whole idea is that you need more, so he has to combine. And you're right, exactly. And the piece of meat over there is acting like a yad, not a shomer, right?
No, the idea of combination applies to tumas oichlin, by to be mitama other foods.
Okay.
But not by this.
Okay. I understand. All right. You're talking about if it's mitame the
If it,
house, right?
it's matama the house, but if it was
Right,
matama the
right.
food, it would have to be the
Okay,
size of the.
that's the point. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So now here we have the Brisa says you have a firmer bone, right? A femur bone that has a kazayas of red, which would be meat on it, right? If a tama touched, let's say sharets touched this yad, then the meat becomes tame, and it's matama the egg, right? So that's gonna be matama the egg, right? So that's the Rabbi Yehuda says. Acherim oimim, but the other says afila ein oleha kapul. Even if on top of the bone there's only a bean size of meat on it, gereres kula l'tumah. It combines it draws the tumah throughout the bone. Now, so Rav certainly can't agree with Acherim because Rav says, let's say by the hot dog with the toothpick, if a tiny hot dog and a toothpick, you say that the toothpick is not a yad. Well, if the on top of this femur bone has less than a zayit, it only has a pull, a bean size of meat. So how could the Acherim hold gereres kula l'tumah? That's the question. Rav Hai b'mayim moikim law. How could he understand this brisa? Yad, if you reading the brisa as a yad, the bone is a handle, kasha sefer, then the end of the brisa makes no sense. How could Rav agree with the Acherim that it's a good yad? If it's talking about a shomer, that means the femur bone is actually doesn't have a red meat on top of it, but actually has like a zayas of green of marrow inside of it. So then Rav will not agree with the beginning. Why? Because kashiresha, there will be then we have the beginning of the Rabbi Yehuda would not agree to Rav because Rav doesn't need a kazayas in order for it to be a shomer. Even if it's less than a zayas, Rav considers it a shomer. So the answer there is the same idea. You can learn the Brisa is talking about it's a yad. Yehuda Amak Rabbi Yehuda, and Rav was going with the opinion Rabbi Yehuda. If you want to say it's a shomer, and Rav will hold that you don't need a kazayas to be a shomer. You could even be the size of a pool to be a shomer. Kacherim. Now the Gemara just says Rabbi Yochanan Amar. Rabbi Yochanan says kulay b'shomer. Rabbi Yochanan says both. This whole idea of a femur bone is talking about a shomer, and a shomer, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you could be a shomer on a tiny drop of marrow, and you consider it a shomer. So, kula b'shomer who da'amak acherim. Rabbi Yochanan agrees with acherim that even if there's only marrow of a bean size, it could gereres kula b'tuma. Says the Gemara, but acherim hakapul ka'amri. But the acherim needed to be a bean size, and Rabbi Yochanan says you could be a shomer even if you're a shomer on something that's not a bean size. So how could you say Rabbi Yochanan agrees with acherim? So the Gemara is saying, "Aidi de ka'ama tanakama shiura, ka'ama ininame shiura." So the Tanakama gave a shear of bean, so acherim gives the size of a bean. But the truth is, acherim are exactly what Rabbi Yochanan says, that you could be a shomer, a protector of food, a protector of marrow, even if you only have a drop of marrow inside. Again, what does this all mean? You have a bone, it has a drop of marrow inside, according to Rabbi Yochanan. If a tumah touches that bone, right, it can transmit tumah to an item of food. You could be a shomer. Amar Rava says, Daikinami de b'shomer askinen, the ketani kulius, because the brisa definitely is talking about the marrow, because why did it pick a femur bone? Femur bone is like the only is a bone that has marrow in it. Shma mino. Itmer nami. Rabbi Chanina Amar zehu shir. Rabbi Yochanan ein zeh shir. Rabbi Chanina said that acherim said kapul, and they were pretty exact in what they were saying. Rabbi Yochanan says not true. Ein zeh shir. They didn't pick up that has to be a bean sign. You could be a shomer even if it's less than a bean sign. All katani pull. Why did it say pull? I did the kama tanakama shura, kama inin nami shura. Since they said shear, so he also said shear. But really, the Tanakama, the Acherim hold that even if it's less than a pool size of barrow inside, it's still considered a shomer. Okay, so that's what we're discussing over here. Again, let's go over again. We have a machlokes between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan, and we're going to ask a question against Rav. Rav said that if you have a yad to something that's less than a kazayis, then if you have a yad that's something less than a kazayis, then that's not considered a yad. So wait a second. Tashma, Rab Loza ben Azariah, Metar b'shel pool, Metame b'shel kitnius, B'nei sheroitze b'mashmishan. In another mission in Uktzin, we find this. Rabbi Yochanan, that Rab Loza ben Azariah, I believe it's Rab Loza ben Azariah, he said that a shomer could be even not on a big bean, because a big bean in a pod, you could pull it out yourself. You don't, and keep it clean. But a small, tiny legume in a pod, so if there's one of them, you can still consider the shell around it a shomer because you want the legume to be there. Now, look at this. It's a shomer to a legume which is less than an azayas. So how could a shomer, how could Rav Loza ben Azariah hold that the legume could become tameh if, let's say, a tuma touched the shomer? The legume becomes tameh because this is a shomer to a legume. How could you call it a shomer? The size of the legume is less than a kazayas. That's what the question is. And legumes, he says it's tameh. You want that pod there. So it's considered shomer even if something very, very small. Answers the Gemara. Here, we're not talking about it's a shomer, but here we're talking about there's a bunch of, you have a stalk with a bunch of pods. Each one has one legume in it, okay? And you're touching the stem. And when you take it all together, you have all the legumes together, you have a zayas. But if the tumah touches the yad, so then all of these legumes become tameh. Now, why do they become tameh? The Brisa said that it's because you want it to serve the legumes. This is not really serving the legumes; it's serving the pods, which is serving the legumes. So you have to read it into the Brisa. That's you want to use the stem, the stalk, to be able to serve the pods, which is going to serve the legumes.
Bernie, just one question.
Yeah, sure.
So if the yad is mitame, it could transmit to the legume, okay, the inside, wherever. But is the converse true? Let's say it's mitame the pod. At that point can the yad transmit?
Oh, so in this case, according to Rav, the way the Gemara now learns that you cannot be a shomer on something smaller than an olive,
okay,
on a pull, on less than a bean. So right. This would not be considered a shomer. So if your tumah would touch this shomer, it wouldn't mitama the yad. It's only because it touches the yad, then everything becomes tameh.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Gemara is going to say that the Gemara is now changing it, right at this point. The Gemara is going to change it and says, yes, this could be a shomer, even if it's a tiny, less than a pull. Why? Because it was born this way. And when something is born this way, then you could be a shomer even if the inside is less than a pull. You see, you can't be a shomer if take a little bone marrow that you have like in the chong. There's a tiny drop of marrow in there. So then Rav will hold that cannot be a shomer because it's not natural that way. It wasn't born that way. But here it was created this way, so it could be a shomer. That's what the Gemara is going to say right at this moment. And then we go on to another topic. Tashma, come in here. Tanad Bey Rabbi Shmuel, a kol zera zerua kederach shbnei yodim mitzian chita bekli pasa, sara bekli pasa, v'adashim bekli pasa. A thing could become tame, a legume which is so tiny, with its klipa, right? I don't know if you ever seen a wheat with its shell; it's very tiny, right? So adashim with its klipa could be a shomer, and it's tame. So this brisa clearly says not like Rav. Rav says you can't call a shomer something that is protecting something less than a pool. Answers the Gemara, Bir Yashani. So since this is it was created this way, so then that's the way it is. A lentil with its shell, the shell is considered a shomer, even though the lentil is such a tiny size. But a bone is different. A bone is the marrow is all over the body. It's not one marrow. So if you have a piece of a bone and it's protecting just a tiny drop of marrow, that's not considered a shomer according to Rav. New Gemara, boy Ravashi. Ravashi asked the question. We're going to stop in like 3 minutes. Shnei shomrim mahoshi starful. Let's say you have two shomer, and in order to make it into the size of an egg. Now, why would you need? Let's say you have an onion. It has 2 peels on it, right? So in order for the onion, let's say the onion is tame, and it wanted to be matama something else, the onion has to be the size of an egg, right? That's called yitztarfu. Let's say the onion itself is not the size of an egg, but if you count the 2 peels, you get the size of an egg. But why would you say something needs two shmira? 1 shmira should be enough. Maybe the second shomer, the one on top of the peel on top, should not be counted. So that's the question Rabbi Ashi asked. So the Gemara says, "Hey chedami, if you're talking about 2 shomers, one on top of another, do we hold that a shomer on top of a shomer is good?" Well, Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says, an onion has 3 skins on it. Panimi is the one that's edible, that's mamish on top of the onion. Ben shleimer, ben kedura, it's the refus. That's real shleimer, no matter if it's whole or if it has holes in it. And combines with the onion because it's edible. And so is the middle peel shleimer if it's in complete mitzdarefes. It combines. Kedura a mitzdaref. It has holes in it. It's not combining. Chitzaina, the last peel on an onion. Ben kach tahira, you don't count it because it's unnecessary. It's not really a protection. A shomer has to be a protection. So basically, if his question was about protection, we have open mishnahs about a shomer on top of a shomer. So the Gemara says like this: Rav Oshaya, shomer oichel shechilkel kababayile, kaven the high loy mogen a high loy mitzdarefes, idilma kiven the high mogen a day mitzdarfen. Look at the picture. The picture is you have a little tiny onion, right? Let's say it's the size of a kazayas, this onion, together with the peels, but you split the onion in half. So there's a half a zayas over here, a half a zayas on one side and half a zayas on the other side. So now, would you consider this onion, if they're touching each other, if they're touching each other, do they combine? Because this peel size peel is only protecting a half an onion. This size peel is protecting a half an onion. So maybe they don't combine, or they do combine because at the end of the day you have an onion with the peels attached to it, and they're protecting where it's supposed to protect. In other words, does a shomer have to protect the whole thing at one shot? Or a shomer could be a shomer even if it's only protecting half and it's split off from the other half. So that's the question. A shomer of an oichel that they split it up. Each one is not protecting the other side. They don't combine. Each one is protecting each other. So they do protect. So let's just finish up. Tashma, Rab Lazar ben Azariah, Matayah b'shal pul, Matam b'shal kittim, they should write to Mashmishan. Same price of Rab Lazar ben Azariah. And the Gemara learned that Rab Lazar ben Azariah is talking about that you have like just 2 or 3 pods with a little bean inside of it, and they combine to make the size of an egg. So we see that a split onion could be combined if it's held together to make the size of an egg, even though the shomers are only protecting half. There it's not talking about a shomer. That Bryce is talking about the yad, the stalk that leads on to many different pods. So the Gemara is not resolving it, and the Gemara is going to say like this: Tashma, Tandabei Shmola, Kolzera Zerua, Kadesh Bnei Adam Maitzim Zriya Chita Beklibasa Raib Kulasam Dasham Beklibasam. The Bryce says that a bean with its shell and a piece of wheat with its cover, it becomes tame. Now, how could the bean with its cover be a size of an egg? The answer is you're combining a bunch of different pieces of wheat with their shells, and even though with their shells they become the size of an egg, they combine. So we see from there that you could combine things, a shomer that's not protecting an entire thing at the same time. A bunch of little shomers could combine. And says the Gemara, so the Gemara says here we're talking about the stem of a piece of wheat. I think what we're talking about is the stem of a piece of wheat, and therefore the whole beard of a piece of wheat over here, that you combine them all, they are shomers that could combine because they all need each other. So the Gemara is going to say, okay, I understand that the top needs the bottom, because if you remove the bottom, all the pieces fall off. But if you remove the top, the bottom could still remain. So what is the shomer? How are they dependent on each other? That's the Gemara's question. And the Gemara is going to say, Bechad Dori. That means the top ones need the bottom ones. But how do the bottom ones need the top ones? And says the Gemara, Bechad Dori. We're talking about they're all in one row. So we're talking about one row of wheat kernels. So the question is, but then you don't have a kabeya. You don't have the size of an egg. Do they equal the size of an egg? Answers the Gemara, yes. In the times of Shimon Beshatach, the wheat was so big that even in one row of on top of a wheat stalk, you have the size of an egg of wheat in there. If you're talking about Shimon ben Shattach's time, there could have been just one little kernel with a protective shell on it, but the size of that wheat, the size of the bean, the size of the thing inside was the size of an egg. Okay, we'll leave this for now. Okay. Good Nacht, everybody.
Have a good Shabbos.
Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbos.